Okay. JNet Studio up with a mountain background. Michelle Medlock Adams is standing by in our green room. All cameras are aimed. They are in focus. And we'll be ready to switch to our studio in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, good evening and welcome to PJNet Live. Now, I say good evening. That assumes that you are watching this in the evening, which may not be the case. If you're watching this live, I'm glad you're here. If you are not watching this live, you could be watching it on YouTube. You could be watching it posted on social media, something like that. I hope you'll come join us live about 9 o'clock every weeknight, almost every night anyway. We get together, you'll be among friends and have some fun in our chat room. We watch interesting videos, and on almost every night we have an interesting guest. Except tonight. All we have is Michelle.
Yep. That's all you got.
I haven't had much sleep. Yeah, it was too easy. Michelle Medlock Adams is a very. I've only known her a little while. Met her by way of Del Didway, who was here last night, and so we've only been on the air a couple of weeks, but we've already had some very interesting times together. And today we were kind of talking about what we're going to talk about, and we're saving a fitness one for later. I'm just giving you a fair warning. We may do that next year after I get in shape. How's that?
Gives us motivation to talk about that. That's right.
So, in any event, we will save that one. We were kind of emailing or exchanging messages by whatever method. I forget which one. And Michelle says she's going to get home early tonight because she's been, doing some stuff. And I thought, well, how nice of her, because it doesn't take long if you kind of keep up with Michelle. It's like trying to watch an octopus on roller skates. She's doing a lot of stuff, and she's very busy. But Michelle, seriously, I was very touched by your generosity in your time that you give, not only here, but this week. Tell us a little bit. Well, bring us up to speed since last week. Your life is like being in a blender. So let's roll it back about a week and tell us what you've been doing in that week. But I'm particularly interested in what you've been doing the evenings of this week.
So one of the things that I do as part of my ministry is I speak to writers all over the country at various writers' conferences. And the one that I was at last week, which was in Chicago, and we had that technical difficulty because there was a terrible storm coming through. So I hate that I couldn't talk with all of you longer. But it was called Right to Publish. It's held at Wheaton University there, Billy Graham land, actually. Beautiful there. And I speak to writers about, how to become a writer and tricks to breaking into the children's writing market. And then I taught about how to write for like Clubhouse Magazine, which is Folks in the Family magazine, and different things like that. So it was 4 days of just one-on-one appointments with writers showing me their work and us trying to find publishing houses and magazines that it might be a good fit. Sometimes you counsel, sometimes you pray with people. You just never know what those 15-minute appointments are going to have, and you just have to be ready for it. And then I spend 2.5 hours every day then teaching about writing. It's wonderful because writers, we're all a little bit weird. So it's kind of like, we don't get out a lot. We just, we're always behind our computer writing. So when we all get together, it's like all this weirdness comes together for one giant weird thing. And it's great because you feel like I found my people, like these are my people. And it's a really great time of ministry. So I love it. I love the Christian Writers Conferences especially. So that was a blessing to be there. But it's literally from 8 in the morning till sometimes 11 at night, you are just going crazy. So when I come home from that, I am tired. And as it just so happened, this week, it's just, literally the night I drove home, that very night, this church camp started. It's called Camp Challenge. And it's just about, 18 minutes from where I live here in Bedford, Indiana, down East 50. And my best friend, since I was 5, she was in my kindergarten class. And I went in and said, "Hi, my name is Missy Medlock. Missy's my nickname. Will you be my friend?" And she said, "Yes, thank goodness." And Angie McCullough and I have been friends ever since. And she's the director of this camp every year. So every year she asked me to come and be the speaker. This is my 5th year. And, of all the things I do throughout the year, this is the most important to me, because I get to talk to children ages third, fourth, and fifth grade about Jesus. And it is just, I mean, these campers, some of them now have graduated to the next camp. And I'm so sad because we've grown up together. I mean, I've seen them there every year. And like last night, the reason I got home so late, we had, after I preached the word, we're talking about Isaiah 40, 28 through 31 this week, about, how God is an everlasting God and how he renews our strength. And after that, then we went outside and we had a shaving cream war. I have shaving cream in places that I didn't know shaving cream could be. Like, they love to get the shaving cream all over Michelle. So that was really, really fun. That was last night. Tonight, I didn't have shaving cream. We played Octoball. Have you ever played Octoball? Is that something you've ever played? Because you're a coach. I thought maybe, no?
No. Is the ball round or is it octagonal?
It is actually round. And I think it's because you have to be an octopus to be able to, like, avoid it. It's kind of like a sophisticated dodgeball.
Okay.
These kids are brutal. They are brutal. I mean, they can't wait to get me out. So that's been really fun. And then tomorrow night they're having a talent show after we preach the word. But it's just, church camp for me, going back to when I was a kid, we used to go, I grew up in the Free Methodist Church in Southern Indiana, and we used to go to Clay City, Indiana, in Wabash County, and we would go to Camp Wildwood. I don't know if any of you out there who are watching, or either live or by video later, have ever been there, but it's a beautiful part of Indiana. But we would go every year from the time I was old enough to go until I could be a counselor. Church camp to me was the time that I would renew my relationship with God, and being in nature, and just there was just so many things we learned, really cool things like archery skills, and we sang all kinds of campfire songs, and it's just a time of bonding with other friends, but really getting one-on-one with God. And every year church camp meant something to me. And my friend Angie that I was talking about, she found Jesus at church camp. So that's why she takes her time, and she's busy. She runs her own business, and as a teacher during the school year, she takes her time every year to direct this camp, because she knows what it can mean to a child and their relationship with God. So it's just a special week. I'm loving every minute of it.
I wonder if they offer that for adults and make it sound really good. I need that,
Yes, minus the shaving cream wars, I think it will be a really great thing for adults. It's just amazing. It's a renewal time. It's a time, and there are kids at this camp from all over the Midwest. And what you find out is many of them have never been churched. They've never gone to church. They might have been to VBS a time or two, but they do a lot of sports at this camp challenge. It's also like a sports camp. And so a lot of kids come with no knowledge of God. So you start right where they are, and you get to tell them about, God is everlasting, and sometimes he allows bad things to happen. And like today we talked about how in our weakness, God is made strong. And so I talked about things in my life that had happened. And at the time I'm like, God, where are you in this? I mean, are you on vacation? Are you not seeing what's going on? Why is this happening? I'm like, I'm sure we've all prayed that at some point. And I said that to the kids. I said, I'm sure there's been times in your life you've wondered why God's letting this stuff happen. But in our weakness, God is made strong. He doesn't bring the bad stuff, but he'll use it. And he'll use it usually to show himself strong. And that can be your testimony. That can go all over the world. You hear about things going viral on the internet. Those kinds of testimonies go viral. And so we talked about that and what it means to have God in your life. And tonight was the night of commitment. So I got to lead 106 children in the sinner's prayer, talk to them about, what it means to make a commitment to Christ. And they repeated after me. And I said, if this is your first time saying this prayer and giving your life over to God, I want you to tell your camp counselor so they can, give you some materials and talk to you about it. I mean, there's really no greater privilege than that. So I think if you guys are out there listening tonight, man, if you've got time to volunteer some and get involved with kids, that is the most rewarding thing you'll ever do. It's amazing.
Rewinding back to your, you were at this, I forget what you called it, a conference for prospective or potential writers.
Right.
I don't know what, obviously the people that come there have an interest in, and I don't even know if it costs money, but let's presume they made a substantial investment at the very least in their time, perhaps traveling to it. And I'm a software developer, Michelle, and people come to me with ideas. Mm-hmm. And of course, I want to listen, I want to, but every now and then I don't know what to tell them other than, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard in my life. I mean, do you seriously? In other words, what do you do? Have you ever had to just tell somebody you're just not there yet? Or, I mean, how do you handle that?
So, I mean, yeah, like there are some people that come to conferences. Now, honestly, the right to publish, the one I just came from, I say this every year. There is a different level of writer that comes to this conference.
Hmm.
I actually found six different people at this conference where I took their work and sent it on to one of my editors
Hmm.
because it was so strong. That is not always the case at all the conferences where I teach. And so I've had some real doozies where, you're reading the story and you're like, did you really think kids would read this? Like it's so graphic or so horrific. I mean, and at that time you try to find something positive to say. So you're like, wow, I really love the font you chose for your story. And like those margins are like thumbs up on those margins. Like, because you gotta frame it in something positive and then you can go into like the critiquing. So you always look for a couple of things to say. It's true. But yeah, sometimes it's a little rough a few times. Yeah, I'll have to say.
Put a cushion
Yeah.
under it before you throw them down.
Right. That's how you frame it up so that you can then tell them, yeah, that's not really kid appropriate, and here's why.
They
Yeah.
don't, and sometimes, well, all of us, have a need to be affirmed and to be told that we're worthwhile and valuable,
Yes.
regardless. And I guess they come needing that affirmation, and sometimes
Yeah.
you just can't get. You're not doing them a service; you're doing them a disservice. To say, "Wow, this is great," but it takes a special type of interpersonal skill. It's a little different in my scenario because they've come to me, they want to pay me, and I can brush them off a
Hmm.
lot easier. Where they
Yeah.
come to you with hope, and
Hmm.
ambition and excitement, and they're thinking all these things, and oh boy! But then there's the other side,
Hmm.
where you find somebody that's really got something.
Yes, that's exciting. The ones that come, this is the hardest part when people paid a lot of money to come to these, and they can only choose so many one-on-one appointments, and they've chosen you like as one of
Hmm.
their golden tickets to use on, and so you realize that like this is a privilege that they and you want to make it worth their while. They only get 15 minutes to pitch to you, and so I always take that into consideration. But sometimes when it's really not good, and then you're trying to give instruction, some people don't want to hear it, and I've had several say, well, God told me this, like God wrote this story. I really didn't write it. I was just the vessel, and God just wrote it. And you're thinking, well, God's a really bad writer then. Like you feel really bad because you're exactly right. Like you can't lie to somebody and tell them it's really good and then
Yeah.
have them send it off and it be rejected. What I want to do is find something good in the story and say, man, this your description's amazing. You're maybe the way that you told it was more telling than showing, but your description in this paragraph is really strong. So if you can build on this, you can find something good to say. And that is exciting when you see those wheels turn and you see the light go on and they're like, oh, I get it. And then I'll always say, you can send that to me after you rework it. I'm happy to look at it. And when they do, I'm so thrilled to see if they've applied what I told them, because people helped me when I was getting started, and so you want to be able to give back, because I made a vow to God. I don't do those lightly. When I was at this exact same conference back in like 2000, I think I might have shared this with you. I was loving being there, and my husband had spent money, like it was our anniversary present, my birthday present, I think Mother's Day. Like it was expensive for me to go because I was flying from Texas to Chicago to this conference, and I wanted to take this writing for children class. And the very first day I was at this conference, the instructor said, "Listen, y'all, let me just say this to you. If you're in this class and you've never been published in children's before, this is the wrong class. I mean, go to somebody else's class, because even myself," she said, having been published many, many times over in children's, I'm having trouble right now getting published. So I just don't want to see these you newbies trying to get published, because it's not going to happen for you. I mean, bottom line, it's a tough business, and this is just the wrong time to break into children's." And I'm thinking, we spent like so much money for me to come. I couldn't wait to sit in this person's class
Mm.
because they were so accomplished, and they just totally stepped on my frog. Like, what in the world? So I was aggravated. I was so mad. I went back to my dorm room because we were staying in the dorms, and I was just aggravated. I'm like, what is wrong with this lady? And so, I thought, wonder how many people's dreams were squashed that day. But I'm just sassy enough, a little bit stubborn. I went to the Lord and I got on my knees that night in my dorm room and I said, listen, God, if I ever am considered successful, if I ever make it in this industry, I promise you, I will encourage writers. I will not go in front of a class and say something like that. I will definitely let you use me to encourage other writers. And so I made that vow, and it wasn't very long, a couple of years. I was on the other side of the podium teaching people how to be published, And so that's why I make time to speak to writers every year, because I promised God I would. So it is a privilege, but you do have to be honest. You can't tell somebody it's really good if it's not, because then they won't get better. So
Yep.
yeah, that's kind of where I stand on that.
I remember you're sharing that story, and it's bringing back a
Yeah.
memory. There's a couple of real turning points, in my Christian walk, and the walk is we never get there. We're always just growing in Christ.
Yeah.
But I had gone to my very first mission trip to Barbados,
Oh, wow.
and I had never even flown up to that point.
Oh, my.
And so I came back, and you have to understand, there's this dear lady in our church, uh, just the most wonderful, glowing, radiant, never had a bad word to say about anybody. In fact, and I practically raised her three children. Her husband
Aw.
was in the trucking business, so he was absent a lot. Not that he wasn't a good dad and didn't love his kids, but he spent money on them, rather. Anyway, I'm getting off track. I love this woman so much. My wife and I, when we made plans to adopt, we didn't even tell our parents, but we shared with her
Aw.
to join us in prayer. This woman, to all that is to say, this is a woman that is very dear to my heart, and she was such a lovely woman. So I came back and I said, "Oh, Angie, we did this, and man, Monday we did this, Tuesday we did that, and da 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 da."
Yeah.
And she looked at me and said, "Mark, I am so glad that you have been busy propping up the throne of God. I thought he might topple if it weren't for you."
Oh, wow.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still kind of get
Yeah.
chills. She's in heaven
Right.
today. And I thought to myself, because I had all this enthusiasm, and she really
Yeah.
busted my bubble, but she made me realize, you're out there working for God.
Yes.
Let God work through you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we tend, you said, "Oh, God gave me the words for this book." A lot of times we take our plans and we kind of project them on God. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We get this idea, and then we say it's God's idea, because see, if it's, because then it's going to be great, right? Because God is great, right?
Right.
The other occasion was in a men's ministry setting. A very dear friend of mine, who was the director of disaster relief operations for the Florida Baptist Convention. He was second in command in the state of Florida, answering
Wow.
only to the president. And actually, during a disaster, the president answers to him.
Oh,
That's how
my.
serious we take disaster relief here in Florida. And I was kind of on a similar path, giving this guy my Christian resume, and telling him I did this, I did that. And he says, "Mark, you're trying to work for God." And he got this from Blackaby's book, Experiencing God. And he gave me that book and signed it saying, "I want you to read this. I know you're not a reader." But he said, "I implore you to read this." And in that book, it basically says this: quit trying to do things for God. God is already at work everywhere. Go find where God is doing a work and join in that work, and quit trying to come up with your own ideas. Now that is not to say that there aren't some good ideas. Somebody had to come up with a good idea.
Oh, sure.
But a
Yeah.
lot of us get sidetracked. We project upon God, "Oh yeah, I believe that, God anointed Ted Cruz to be president." Well, please don't say that. How do you know? And why would he tell you? I mean,
Right. Yeah.
and then of course when it doesn't happen, then you lose all credibility. And then they'll come along and say, "Well, God anointed this." Well, I kind of keep that to myself. I let God reveal Himself. I don't think God has called me to be a prophet. I'd just like to make a prophet if I could. But anyway, but your experience reminds me of that. And now these kids, you said, were like between 5th and 8th grade, or 5 and 8 years old. I forget what you said.
Actually, it's third, fourth, and fifth graders. So the kids that will be in third, fourth, or fifth grade come fall, those are the ones that are in this week. Now they have camp all summer long for different age groups. Like last week
Oh, okay.
were the older kids, like the 6th, 7th, and 8th, the middle schoolers. But this is the third, fourth, and fifth. And this is a precious age. Like I love this age group. That's when they still think you're cool. Like they still, they still want to hug you, and I love this age group because they still get excited about things, and they don't care to be excited about it. And I just love this age group so much. I mean, and last, God will always, it seems like he will always have sort of an encouragement for you. You think you're there to encourage them. And of course you
Mm-hmm.
go hoping to do that. But the way God works, he always encourages us too. It's like these kids are so amazing. Like last night after I finished talking and, we were getting ready to go out for the shaving cream fight. I've been giving out some of my books every night. I'll review whatever we talked about the night before. I'll ask questions if they memorize the memory verse or if they can remember different parts of what I talked about, like everlasting God. I said, no, what is the Bible name for that? And it's El Olam, Olam. And I told him it was in the Bible 439 times. I don't know if you know that. That's a little trivia for you. And like I asked that question, and they knew that how many times. They knew what it meant. Like they listened. So I give them copies of some of my books. And that book, well, there it is, Dinosaur Devotions. That's for that age group, ages 8 to 12. Boy, you're good. Ages 8 to 12, that's for. And so I had that to give out the last 3 nights. I think I'll gave away 10 or 12 each night. And I also gave away So What is America and a couple others. But anyway, so when he came up afterwards and he said, hey, I want to know if you would sign my Dinosaur Devotion book. And I said, oh, I would be happy to sign it. He said, I'm going to read it through 5 times. I'm like, all right, well, that's amazing. That makes me so happy I wrote it. He goes, and I thought he was going to walk off, and he turned back around and he goes, hey, thanks for being here. It's just like, I just wanted to cry. I'm like, God bless his little precious heart. Like, I just, because I'll be honest, I'm tired. I was in Chicago all week and I worked hard, and yet God was so cool to me just to say, through this little boy, thanks for being here. I don't know. It just always amazes me when God does something like that. You think, like you said, you're working for him, and God, you can't outgive God. He's always got something for you. So I do love being there for this week. These are neat kids, really, really precious kids.
They are at a point in life that is precious. And
Yeah.
one of the things that at our church, there's a thing called Royal Ambassadors. Now, let me explain what that is. It's sort of a Christian Boy Scouts type thing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
But at our small church, what it really was a place where you babysit the kids while their parents were in choir practice. And that was essentially what the
Yes.
RA program was when it was kind of dumped in my lap. Well, I certainly am not into babysitting, and I was dealing with kids, I guess in about the 5th grade to the 8th grade, somewhere in there. And I'd never done anything like this, but God just kind of blessed it. And 2 of those kids, I took them to Barbados with me on a mission trip.
Aw.
And
That's
and that was the reward, saying, if you do well and show in attendance, and you have to earn it, and your parents have to pay for it. But but when it was all over, it did end because they got out of hand. There got to be so many of them that they were noisy and they were distracting the choir. So the deacons had to put an end to that. And some of the kids up there were, well, they're just not church material. They're a bad influence on our church kids. And I told them, you need a new person. Anyway, I'm starting to sound bitter.
No, but I get
But
that.
when it was
yeah.
over, I spoke to the kids, and it's hard not to tear up. I said,
Oh, yeah.
I was brought in here to teach and lead you, but I promise you, you have taught me far more
Amen. That's
than
right.
I could ever teach you. And it was just a very moving moment. And I'll always
That's true.
look back on that. And it's funny because one of those kids went on to be he's not a minister, but just a champion for Christ. And I remember one time he was speaking at our home church. Now, I was out of town, but he sent me a tape because well, we're friends, yeah. And this was back in the days of a cassette tape. I know you're old enough to know what that is.
Yep.
So I'm listening to the tape because he in his presentation, he's going through, some of the people in our church that have been giants in his spiritual walk that he looked up to. And I kept listening for my name. And he never came up. So I rewound the thing saying I must have missed it, And he never mentioned me. And I was really, hurt. And I thought, well, no, I need to do a spiritual checkup. But I'm really proud of this young man and to have a part. And after a while, you start thinking, well, I had a part in that. Well, I also think of another young man in that same group that is in jail today. If I'm going to take credit for the guy that did well, then I would have to take the blame for the guy that did not.
Interesting perspective.
So, enjoy those successful moments. Enjoy the blessings from God, but understand that, you're not the blessing. God is. God.
That's
you just
right.
let God use you, and you'll
That's
always
exactly
be fulfilled. Because if you think it's you, when things don't turn out, then you would have to take the blame for that now, wouldn't you?
That's right. I think I learned this thing from my parents. My mom and dad are both in heaven now, Walter and Mary Medlock. But when both of my mom and dad passed, they passed 2 years out, from each other. Dad was in 2004, mom was in 2006. But at their funerals back here in Bedford, Indiana, I mean, you couldn't get in. There was, people, there was a line to come up and talk to the family. And every single person had a story about my parents. My mom and dad were Sunday school teachers for the senior high class for probably 30 years at the Bedford Free Methodist Church. And so you can imagine the amount of kids that had graduated and had come back then to pay their respects to my parents. And, some of the guys that would come through, they didn't look like somebody that had ever gone to church. And they were kind of gruff and like they didn't look like somebody you'd want to meet at night in the alley kind of thing. And yet, right? I mean, they were just, and I remember they would walk up and you'd be like, oh, okay. And I remember, I'll never forget, this one guy came up and he shook my hand and he said, your dad bought me the only watch I ever had. And he was still wearing it. It didn't tell time anymore. It didn't, it was...
Well, it was correct twice a day.
Twice a day, it was right, you're right. And he had it on, he showed me, and he said, that was something he gave us senior boys when we graduated. And he said, I never forgot it. And he began to tell me some things that mom and dad had imparted into him. Man, he just, mom and dad say affected, but they did affect a lot of lives before they went to heaven. They probably know now because they're up in heaven. But I think there's sometimes, like that young man didn't say anything on the cassette tape you listened, and he didn't say anything. But you know what? You may get credit for something in heaven, because you just never know what words you said. It says in the Bible that God's word never returns void. And if we're preaching his word, even if we don't see those immediate results, and even if sometimes the people end up in jail, that doesn't mean that those words, the story's not finished. Those words are still in that young man's heart.
That's right.
And they can still take root and they can still sprout, and God isn't done with that young man. So I always think about that when I see, we can't measure success really, because only God knows how this turns out. And it says his ways are higher than our ways. So I just trust him with it. We just do what he calls us to do and let him take care of the rest.
This is a knife that I received as a graduation present from high school.
Aw, see that? People keep those things, yeah.
I still have it. It looks brand new because I take really good care of it. And the person that gave this to me is in heaven. And I guarantee you, when you meet her, you'll know who I'm talking about. She is a pistol.
There are two people like that in my life that they led kids' church. Like you said, it's when the big church is going on, they have the kids' church. And at our church, it was Donna. And then his name was Ivan. I called him the ambassador of love. I wrote a story about him.
Well, folks, right now we are kind of losing the audio from Michelle.
Books.
There she came back. Yeah, we're fading in and out. I guess that's our warning. We're at the 29-minute mark. I guess God is telling us we're, to
wrap
we don't.
It up, yeah.
I said this last night, Michelle. We don't set a time limit on this. Nor do we script it. We just kind of have a 1 or 2 sentence, here's what we're going to talk about. And we start there, and wherever we go, that's, it's just a journey. It's like your walk with God. You just don't know. You just take the next step. The illustration was, remember the old Coleman lanterns? You're old enough to know what that is.
I actually don't know what that is.
Oh, yeah. So. They were, they had a handle that you put kerosene in the bottom of it, and they had 2 little bag filaments at the top, and it would blow, and those things would glow real. Anyway, it was a standard issue for anybody involved in the outdoors back before they had, high-tech stuff like they do today. But anyway, when you're carrying this lantern in the woods at night, it's so bright, it's blinding. You can't look at it. And if you try to look into the distance, well, the lantern doesn't have a focused beam. So you can't use it to see what's out there. But you can use it to see where your next step is.
Right.
So you take that step, and then the lantern comes with you. And I always thought that was an interesting illustration of our spiritual walk. I don't always know, or even if I think I know, I could be wrong, where our journey with Christ is taking us at any given time. We make our plans, and in the book of right before Revelation, anyway. It says, we make our plans and we're going to prosper and go to this city and do that, but our plans are foolishness to God. Now, does that mean we shouldn't plan? No, it doesn't. No, not at all. Just get some perspective. Is let God lead you. I think of walking down a hallway. And back in my younger years, I was opening doors for God. I would break the door down and charge in. And if there wasn't a door, I would make a door. And as you get more mature, you realize God opens the doors. Okay,
yes, he does.
Just let Him. Right. Would you give God a chance? To do some work.
That's right.
And
that's so true. And sometimes we're over at this door, pounding on the door, and God's like, "That's the wrong door. Like,
wrong door.
I already shut that door.
Yeah,
over here, Michelle.
That's the dirty laundry in there. Yeah,
right. Yeah. So we gotta listen. And that I love the lantern. It says that God's word is a lamp unto our feet and a light into our path.
Yeah.
It is. But we don't. That doesn't mean that we know what's a mile down the road. It's just that's what the walk of faith is, step by step.
Step by step.
Just keep following. Just keep trusting in the guy that's leading us.
Well, and Zig Ziglar is one of my favorites. He's had a big influence in my life, and I remember he told the illustration of a ship at sea on a journey cannot see its destination for 99% of the journey. But they have to trust their instruments.
Good.
We have a compass.
Yes, we do.
We need to trust it. Anyway, all right.
That's
we're
good.
Waxing kind of philosophical, but anyway, that Michelle, listen, I wanted to I want to say thank you for being here. Really, I mean, you're adding a whole lot. You put a lot of sizzle in the skillet, babe. Okay.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
But I just congratulate you and commend you for giving so much of yourself, and what you're doing this week is from your heart. I mean, you can't fake that kind of stuff, and I just commend you for doing that. Folks, just a quick peek around the corner. Michelle is going to have some videos coming up soon. Soon meaning you're going to see the next Wednesday a new intro, what we call the bumper. Okay, the bumper is that video we play at the beginning and the end. And I made one special for Dell. I'm in the process of making one for Michelle, but we're also going to be taking some of that same material and using it as a promo for her books. I'm excited about that, and also for speaking engagements, because I'm finding that speaking engagements go hand in hand with authoring. It seems
true.
It's a big part of the business, so to speak, and I'm just excited about that. Although it kept me up till 4 a.m, but that was last night. That was my choice. Michelle, let's get some rest and say hello to your good husband Jeff. He must, behind every good woman is a surprised father-in-law. I mean, a good a good man.
Yes, amen. Yes.
And I hope to meet Jeff someday. Bring him on the set, one night.
Oh, I will. I sure will.
We'd love to see him. So,
he's a good guy.
All right. Well, we got a lot to do, so let's get that done, and we will see you next week right here on PJ Net Live.